The grand estate of Ravenswood stood as a testament to Elias Grant's unparalleled success. Nestled in the prestigious Ashburn Heights, the mansion's towering windows overlooked manicured gardens and sprawling lawns, a constant reminder of the relentless ambition and sacrifices that had brought him here. Elias, a man of wealth, influence, and unshakable respect, gazed out with quiet pride. His empire, built with unyielding dedication, was the culmination of years of effort. Beside him stood his wife Celeste, a vision of poise and elegance. Though she mirrored his satisfaction, there was an enigmatic glint in her eyes, one that Elias, ever consumed by his pursuits, failed to notice. "Is this what they call paradise on earth, Elias?" she asked softly, her voice tinged with something he couldn't quite place. He turned to her with a smile and wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "Yes, Celeste. This is everything I ever dreamed of, and it's just the beginning for us." Elias had built his empire with sheer determination and ceaseless hard work. He believed in sharing his triumphs with those closest to him, especially Celeste, who had stood by his side through it all. Her admiration for his drive was genuine, at least on the surface. "Let's go out tonight," Elias said enthusiastically. "I've made a reservation at that restaurant you love. You deserve the best, my love." Celeste nodded gracefully, her smile a well-crafted mask hiding a faint flicker of disdain. Elias, preoccupied with his buzzing phone and endless schedule, missed the subtle shift in her expression. Elias prided himself on his values, believing success was meant to be shared. "All of this," he said, gesturing around, "is for us, for our future. I want you to always feel secure, surrounded by the best of everything." Celeste adjusted the pearl necklace around her neck and met his gaze in the mirror. "I know, Elias. I'm very fortunate to be by your side," she replied, her tone enigmatic as she turned to face him. Elias smiled, oblivious to the complexities in her words. He was certain his life was perfect, his achievements unshakable. For Elias, it was just another one of Celeste's routine evenings out, where she often claimed she was catching a movie with friends. "Enjoy the film, my dear," he'd say with a smile, genuinely happy she took time for herself. But the truth was far darker. Instead of heading to the cinema, Celeste would drive to a quiet supermarket parking lot just outside Ashburn Heights. There, she would meet Julian, Elias's younger brother, with whom she shared a dangerous secret. A plan to eliminate Elias and claim his fortune. That night, Celeste arrived at the meeting point promptly. She adjusted her rearview mirror before stepping out of the car, scanning the area to ensure they were alone. Leaning against a lamppost was Julian, his gaze sharp and unwavering. "Is everything ready?" he asked in a low, measured tone. "It's all set," Celeste replied, her voice equally hushed as she glanced around. She detailed the next morning's events. Elias would be driving himself to an important meeting, a perfect opportunity for their scheme. No one would suspect foul play. Julian nodded with grim satisfaction. "This is our chance," he said confidently. The siblings-in-law had meticulously planned every detail. Julian, trusted by Elias and given access to the estate's garage, would sabotage the car's brakes to ensure the incident looked like a tragic accident. "It'll seem like fate," Julian remarked coldly. "No one will question it. And then, the fortune will be ours." Celeste gave a subtle smile of agreement, her heart racing with the thrill of imminent victory. For them, this wasn't just about freedom from Elias, it was about securing a life of comfort and wealth. In their minds, their plan was foolproof. Unbeknownst to Celeste and Julian, a young boy named Noah had sought refuge in the parking lot that fateful evening. Homeless and resourceful, Noah was sharp-eyed and always on alert, relying on his instincts to navigate the dangers of the streets. That night, as the cold seeped into his bones, he noticed the hushed voices and suspicious movements of the couple. Intrigued, he crept closer, taking cover behind a parked van. From his hiding spot, he strained to hear their conversation, his heart pounding as their sinister plan unfolded. Noah quickly pieced together that Elias Grant, the man they spoke of, was the target of a dark scheme. Celeste and Julian planned to get rid of him and claim his fortune. Though he was young, Noah felt the gravity of what he had overheard. "Tomorrow, he leaves early. There's no room for mistakes," Celeste murmured, her voice low but resolute. "Exactly," Julian replied with a chilling laugh. "And he has no idea what's coming." To the conspirators, it was merely a matter of time before Elias was out of their way and the wealth was firmly in Celeste's grasp. But to Noah, their words were a dire warning, a terrible injustice he could not ignore. Fear coursed through him, but his conscience burned brighter. With no family or home, Noah was used to being overlooked, but he couldn't let this evil plan go unchallenged. After one last glance to confirm their commitment to the plot, Celeste and Julian parted ways, agreeing not to communicate again until the deed was done. Confident that no one had witnessed their exchange, they left the parking lot. Noah, his heart heavy with urgency, stayed hidden, contemplating his next move. He didn't know Elias, but he understood that the man's life was at stake. He couldn't stand by and let greed destroy someone. As Celeste got into her car and drove off, Noah made a bold decision: he would follow her. He didn't have much of a plan, but he knew waiting until the next day could be too late. Staying far enough back to remain unnoticed, Noah trailed Celeste through the dimly lit streets. His life on the streets had taught him how to move unnoticed, blending into the shadows with practiced ease. Gradually, the scenery changed. The modest buildings gave way to sprawling estates and grand homes. Noah's pulse quickened as the car turned down a tree-lined lane. At the end of the road, he saw it, a magnificent mansion bathed in the soft glow of strategically placed lights. The grandeur was awe-inspiring, but to Noah it carried an ominous weight. From a concealed spot behind the thick foliage, Noah watched as Celeste's car disappeared through the estate's gates. He crept closer, taking in the towering gates and the imposing structure beyond. "This is where he lives," Noah murmured to himself, a mixture of awe and dread filling his chest. The enormity of what he had to do weighed heavily on him. Despite being just a boy, he knew he couldn't ignore the responsibility of preventing the looming tragedy. "I have to tell him," he whispered. "He needs to know what they're planning." Noah lingered in the shadows, gathering his courage. The mansion loomed like a fortress, its grandeur amplifying his sense of insignificance, yet the thought of staying silent was unbearable. As Noah lingered in the shadow of the estate, his thoughts raced. How could he, a street boy with nothing but his word, convince Elias Grant, a man of wealth and power, of the danger that loomed? He knew his appearance alone would make him easy to dismiss, but the memory of Celeste and Julian's cruel laughter steeled his resolve. "I have to try. If I don't, something terrible will happen," Noah muttered under his breath, his voice barely audible against the quiet of the night. The mansion before him, illuminated against the dark sky, seemed to epitomize perfection. Yet Noah knew the truth lurking behind its walls. The stark contrast between the life Elias believed he had and the betrayal being plotted by those closest to him filled Noah with a sense of urgency. How could anyone be so heartless as to destroy a life for greed? This realization fueled Noah's determination. He couldn't let it happen. He would find a way to make Elias believe him, even if it seemed impossible. For a few more minutes, Noah stayed hidden, studying every detail of the grand estate. He needed to remember the way back. Satisfied he had the layout committed to memory, he slipped away into the night, his steps quiet but his purpose clear. The next morning, Noah returned early, positioning himself near the gates of the mansion. He had spent the night replaying every word he had overheard, the weight of the conspiracy pressing heavily on him. He couldn't shake the fear that Elias might not take him seriously. What if he thinks I'm lying? What if he doesn't believe me? Noah whispered to himself, wrestling with doubt. But every time he recalled Celeste and Julian's plans, his fear gave way to resolve. He couldn't allow such evil to go unchecked. Time seemed to crawl as Noah waited, his eyes scanning every movement near the estate. Finally he spotted a sleek black car approaching the gates. Recognizing Elias at the wheel, Noah acted on pure instinct. With a surge of desperation, he ran into the car's path, frantically waving his arms. The car screeched to a halt and Elias rolled down the window, his face a mixture of irritation and surprise. "What are you doing here?" Elias demanded, his tone sharp. "I need to talk to you. It's urgent, about your safety." Noah replied, his voice trembling but firm. Elias frowned, his suspicion evident, but there was something in the boy's desperate expression that made him pause. "Fine," he said, his tone cautious. "Speak quickly. What's so important?" Taking a deep breath, Noah steadied himself. I overheard a conversation last night between your wife and your brother Julian, he began, carefully watching Elias's reaction. They're planning something. Something terrible. They want you out of the way so they can take everything you have. Elias's expression hardened, his eyes narrowing. A short, incredulous laugh escaped him. That's ridiculous. Celeste and Julian? They would never do such a thing. But Noah stood his ground, his words pouring out with desperate urgency. I know it sounds unbelievable, but I swear it's the truth. They were talking about tampering with your car, your brakes. Please, sir, just check them before you drive anywhere. I wouldn't be here if I wasn't certain of what I heard. The sheer intensity in Noah's voice, coupled with the fear in his eyes, gave Elias pause. An instinct he couldn't quite place nagged at him, urging him to take the boy's warning seriously, even if it sounded absurd. Reluctantly, Elias stepped out of the car, his heart racing despite himself. He called for his trusted mechanic and ordered an inspection of the brakes. Minutes later, the mechanic returned, his face pale and his voice trembling. Sir, the brakes have been tampered with. If you'd driven this car. He trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. Elias felt a cold chill run through him as the implications sank in. The people he trusted most, his wife and brother, had planned to end his life. A mix of shock, anger, and disbelief coursed through him, leaving him momentarily speechless. Noah watched anxiously from a few steps away, his heart pounding. When Elias finally turned to him, his expression had shifted. The suspicion was gone, replaced by a solemn recognition of the courage it had taken for this boy to come forward. Why did you do this? Elias asked, his voice quieter now. Why risk so much to warn me, a stranger? Noah hesitated, then replied softly, Because it was the right thing to do. I couldn't let them get away with it. Elias stared at the boy, a mix of gratitude and newfound resolve building within him. His trust had been shattered, but he wasn't about to let betrayal win. He had been given a second chance, and he intended to use it. Elias stood silent for a moment, his thoughts swirling. The wife he had loved and the brother he had supported had conspired to remove him from their lives. It was almost too much to believe, but the evidence was undeniable. His life had been at stake, and he owed it to the street boy for saving him. I owe you my life, Elias said, his voice steady now. I don't know how, but I'll find a way to repay you for your courage. Noah nodded, still processing the enormity of what had just happened. He wasn't sure what to make of the gratitude he saw in Elias's eyes, but he knew he wasn't finished helping. Elias took a deep breath, pushing past the crushing weight of betrayal. He knew he couldn't face this alone. Celeste and Julian needed to be stopped, but it had to be done carefully to avoid alerting them. I need your help, Noah, Elias said, lowering himself to meet the boy's eyes. We're going to expose them for what they've done. But we'll need to stay one step ahead. The determination in Elias's voice resonated with Noah, and the boy nodded, his resolve strengthening. I'll help you, Noah replied firmly. They won't suspect a thing. Elias began to pace, his mind racing as he formulated a plan. Confronting Celeste and Julian directly wouldn't be enough. They had to believe their scheme had succeeded to truly face justice. I'll change my will, Elias said aloud, the idea taking shape. If anything suspicious happens to me, Celeste won't inherit a single cent. Noah's eyes lit up with understanding. So even if they go through with their plan, they won't gain anything? He asked. Exactly, Elias replied with a nod, pleased by the boy's quick grasp of the plan. As they spoke, Elias couldn't help but marvel at Noah's courage and loyalty. Despite his youth and difficult circumstances, the boy had displayed a sense of justice and integrity that impressed him deeply. From now on, we're a team, Elias said firmly. I'll make sure you never have to live on the streets again. In return, I need you to be my eyes and ears. Moved by Elias's trust, Noah felt a surge of determination. I'll do whatever it takes, he promised, his voice steady. Together, they began laying the groundwork for their counterattack, united by a shared purpose: to expose Celeste and Julian's treachery and ensure their plan failed without suspicion. For the first time in years, Elias felt he had an ally he could truly count on. Elias knew they needed an additional step to ensure the plan's success. After a moment of thought, he turned to Noah and said, Changing the will isn't enough. We're going to do something more. I'll stage an accident, They need to believe they've succeeded, that their plan worked. Noah's eyes widened in surprise, but a knowing smile soon crossed his face. So they'll think you're gone, and everything will seem safe for them, the boy murmured, already imagining the impact. Elias nodded. Exactly. Once they're confident, we'll reveal the truth. The decisive night arrived, and the pair was ready to put their plan into action. Elias stopped at a pre-arranged spot to pick up Noah, who was waiting anxiously. As the boy climbed into the car, he exchanged a determined look with Elias. It's time, kid. We need everything to look convincing, Elias said, gripping the steering wheel tightly. Noah nodded, his voice steady and full of resolve. I'm with you, Mr. Elias. Let's do this. Elias drove to a remote road, the location chosen specifically for its isolation. Earlier that day, he had told Celeste he planned to spend a few days at their countryside retreat to unwind. She had bid him goodbye with a subtle, satisfied smile. Take care, darling, and enjoy the rest, Celeste had said sweetly, masking her anticipation. Elias had returned her smile with practiced calm, concealing what he knew. Now, with Noah by his side, the next step of their plan was about to unfold. When they arrived at the desolate area, Elias and Noah began meticulously preparing the scene. Noah checked every corner of the car's interior to ensure no personal belongings that could identify Elias were left behind. Everything's clear here, sir, Noah reported with precision that impressed Elias. Perfect, Elias replied, pleased by the boy's diligence. The next step was the most critical. Elias prepared a small device to ignite the car, ensuring the flames would engulf it entirely. He and Noah retreated to a safe distance before Elias activated the mechanism. Within moments, flames consumed the vehicle, lighting up the night sky with a fierce glow. Noah watched the blaze with a mix of fascination and unease as the fire reduced the car to nothing but charred metal and ash. To anyone who saw the scene, it would look like a tragic accident on a deserted road. The following morning, news of Elias's accident spread quickly. The wreckage was discovered, and everyone believed he had perished in the inferno. Celeste received the news with a carefully rehearsed expression of shock, but when she spoke privately with Julian, her true feelings emerged. He's really gone, she murmured with quiet satisfaction. Julian couldn't hide his grin. Now all we have to do is wait for the inheritance. Everything we wanted is finally within our reach. Playing the role of a grieving widow, Celeste began receiving condolences with a composed and sorrowful demeanor. To the outside world, she appeared as a woman in mourning. But in her moments of solitude, her mind raced with plans for her future with Julian. The two conspirators, certain their plan had worked, felt secure. Confident that Elias's fortune would soon be theirs, they grew bolder in their discussions about the inheritance. Meanwhile, Noah, who had been integral to staging the accident, kept a watchful eye on them. Remaining discreet, he monitored their movements and conversations, noting how they exchanged satisfied glances and discussed accessing Elias's wealth. With every step Celeste and Julian took, Noah ensured that Elias stayed informed, preparing for the moment when the truth would finally come to light. Noah relayed everything to Elias, who was safely hidden away at a remote location. They're fully convinced you're dead, the boy reported with a solemn tone. They already think the money is guaranteed. Elias listened intently, his confidence growing as the plan neared its culmination. With the confirmation that Celeste and Julian had fallen into their trap, Elias and Noah prepared for the next phase. A few days after the staged accident, Celeste and Julian, now playing the roles of the grieving widow and mourning brother-in-law, arrived at Elias's lawyer's office to address the inheritance. The pair believed nothing could stand in their way. During the drive, Celeste felt a heady mix of anxiety and excitement. She worked hard to conceal her eagerness, her expression carefully composed. Beside her, Julian exchanged a confident glance with her, the corner of his mouth curling into a sly smile. Soon, all of this will be behind us, he said calmly. Celeste nodded slightly, her excitement barely contained. Upon entering the office, the pair was greeted by Elias's lawyer, who wore a professional and solemn expression. His demeanor perfectly suited the occasion. Good afternoon, the lawyer said, gesturing for them to sit. Please be patient as we review the documentation thoroughly. The inheritance process requires careful attention to detail. He placed a heavy folder on the desk, its sighs adding to the formality of the moment. Celeste, her face a mask of grief, nodded politely. She needed to appear as though she were fulfilling a solemn obligation, but in truth, her mind was elsewhere, brimming with anticipation. The lawyer began reviewing Elias's will, detailing the full scope of his assets. As he spoke, Celeste's heart raced. The values, properties, and holdings he listed were everything she had dreamed of. Her hands trembled slightly, but she managed to keep her composure. Then, without warning, the lawyer's tone shifted. "There's a special clause here," he said, his gaze sharpening as he looked at the two. "It was recently added." Celeste and Julian exchanged a glance, their expressions curious but calm. "Just a minor detail, I assume," Julian said lightly, striving to appear nonchalant. The lawyer adjusted his glasses and continued, his voice steady and deliberate. "The new clause specifies that Mr. Grant's inheritance can only be received by his wife if he dies of natural causes. In the event of an accident or any suspicious circumstances, the wife and her heirs are excluded from the inheritance entirely." Each word hit like a thunderclap. Celeste and Julian sat frozen, their disbelief palpable. They glanced at each other, trying to process what they'd just heard. This must be a mistake," Celeste stammered, her voice trembling despite her efforts to remain composed. Julian, seated stiffly beside her, tried to recover. "Yes, surely there's been an error. Elias wouldn't make such a significant change without informing. Without discussing it with her." The lawyer fixed them with a piercing gaze, his expression a blend of professionalism and subtle disapproval. "I assure you, this was Mr. Grant's explicit decision, and it is fully documented. This clause was added just days before the accident." Celeste's carefully constructed demeanor began to crack. She turned to Julian, searching for answers, but saw only confusion and frustration in his eyes. Julian shook his head, as if trying to reject the reality of the situation. Celeste's fury simmered as the implications of the inheritance clause became clear. She had always prided herself on controlling every situation, but this time, Elias had outmaneuvered her. Beside her, Julian shifted uncomfortably, his earlier confidence evaporating. "This can't be happening," Celeste muttered, more to herself than anyone else, her voice tinged with desperation. The mask of the grieving widow slipped entirely as her fury took hold. The lawyer observed her with an unflinching gaze, the coldness in his eyes suggesting he saw through her charade. The trap had been set, and now it was beginning to close. It was at that moment an unanticipated figure appeared at the doorway of the lawyer's office. Elias Grant, very much alive, stood tall beside Noah, who wore an expression of quiet triumph. The sight of Elias, the man they believed had been eliminated, left Celeste and Julian frozen in place. Shock washed over their faces, their confident facade crumbling as reality struck. Elias stepped into the room, his sharp gaze fixed on them. His voice was calm but brimming with indignation. "Surprised to see me?" he asked, each word laced with controlled anger. Celeste and Julian remained silent, their throats dry as they struggled to formulate a response. Standing beside Elias, Noah watched the scene with quiet satisfaction, having been part of every step that led to this moment of reckoning. Elias advanced a few more steps, his demeanor unyielding. "I know everything," he said firmly. "I know about your plan. I know about your whispered conversation in that parking lot. I know how much you wanted me gone, to take everything I've worked for." Panic and guilt were etched across Celeste and Julian's faces. They shifted uneasily, their silence betraying their inability to deny the truth. Elias continued, moving deliberately closer. Each step he took carried the weight of betrayal, disappointment, and sorrow. The air in the room grew heavy with unspoken tension. Every glance exchanged a silent acknowledgement of exposed treachery. The man standing before them was no longer the Elias they had known. Hardened by pain and emboldened by the truth, he had become someone who refused to bow to the darkness they had brought into his life. "So," Elias said, his voice steady yet cutting, "you thought you could get rid of me, that everything would be perfect once I was out of the picture. Did you really think there would be no consequences?" Celeste remained silent for a moment, her eyes darting across Elias's face as though searching for a trace of pity she could exploit. Finally she spoke, her voice trembling. "Elias, we only wanted—" "Wanted what, Celeste?" Elias interrupted coldly, his sharp tone cutting through her attempt at remorse. You wanted everything I built, everything I sacrificed for, everything I shared with you. He turned his attention to Julian, who had been avoiding his gaze. And you, Elias said, his voice heavy with bitterness. I thought you were my brother. And yet, what did you do? You stabbed me in the back. Julian flinched at the accusation, his head hanging in shame, but as the silence stretched, he made a feeble attempt at justification. Elias, it was a mistake, Julian stammered. I was confused. Celeste made me believe it was for the best, for her, that you needed to be out of the way. Elias's eyes narrowed, his voice like ice. Don't you dare blame Celeste for your choices, Julian. Every step of this, every detail, was your decision. You chose to betray me. You chose to believe that my life, my future, could be thrown away like it was nothing. Celeste, realizing she was losing control of the situation, lashed out. Her voice rose, no longer restrained. Elias, you distanced yourself, she shouted, her composure unraveling. Over the years, you became so consumed by your business, your wealth, that I felt invisible. All I wanted was someone who actually saw me. Her frustration boiled over, the anger she had kept hidden now fully exposed. I couldn't live in the shadow of a man more married to his fortune than to me. If that makes me guilty, then so be it. But I couldn't keep being just a decoration in your perfect world. Elias listened, his face set in a grim mask of resolve. Whatever traces of compassion he might have felt had long since dissolved in the flood of pain and betrayal. And your solution was to plan my death? He asked, his voice steady and cutting. That's how you decided to handle feeling unseen? By taking everything I am, everything I've worked for, and discarding it? The silence that followed was deafening. Elias's words hung heavy in the air, leaving no room for excuses. This was no longer a battle of arguments. It was the moment where the depth of their betrayal stood fully exposed. Celeste, instead of talking to me, instead of finding a solution, you decided to erase me, Elias said, his voice steady yet brimming with sorrow. As if I were disposable. He turned his gaze to Julian, his expression weighed down by grief. And you, Elias continued, his tone deepening, did you ever truly understand what loyalty means? What family is? Because what you've done is the furthest thing from being a brother. Julian flinched at the words, guilt etched into his face. Beside Elias, Noah remained silent, watching every word fall like a hammer of truth. He had overheard the whispered conspiracies between Celeste and Julian, and while he had known their actions were heinous, witnessing Elias confront them with unflinching dignity was a moment of justice Noah never thought he'd witness. Noah's loyalty was unshakable, and as he looked at Elias, a mixture of respect and empathy filled his gaze. With calm precision, Elias gave the lawyer a slight nod. Without a word, the lawyer signaled, and the office door opened to reveal 2 police officers. They had been waiting, prepared for this moment of truth. Celeste and Julian turned to see the officers and froze. The color drained from their faces as the reality of their situation finally dawned on them. Celeste's mask of calculated composure shattered. Panic took hold as she tried to wriggle out of the inevitable. Elias, you can't do this, she screamed, her voice filled with desperation. I loved you, Elias. I did this for us. Her words, twisted with panic and fury, echoed in the room. Elias stood firm, unmoved by her cries. His voice was steady but laced with bitterness. You didn't do this for us, Celeste. You did it for yourself, your greed. If there had been even an ounce of love left in you, you would have chosen differently. As the officers handcuffed Celeste and Julian, Elias felt a wave of painful relief wash over him. It was as though he was finally closing a bitter chapter of his life. He watched the 2 being led away, their protests growing fainter. Their faces were a mix of hatred and regret, their bravado now crumbled under the weight of their actions. Noah stood by Elias, his expression calm but resolute. He understood the magnitude of what had just transpired. Thanks to his courage, a sinister truth had come to light, and the man standing beside him now had a chance at a secure future. When the police finally departed, taking Celeste and Julian with them, the office fell into a heavy silence. Elias turned to Noah, and for the first time in weeks, felt the burden on his shoulders begin to lighten. Placing a hand on the boy's shoulder, Elias spoke with heartfelt sincerity. If it weren't for you, Noah, I wouldn't be here to see this moment. Noah, who had stood tall through the confrontation, now felt a flicker of shyness. He lowered his gaze, unsure how to respond to such gratitude. "I just did what I thought was right, Mr. Elias," Noah replied, his voice almost a whisper. "I couldn't let them do that to you." Elias smiled, a warmth spreading through his chest. For the first time in a long while, he felt a sense of hope. There was something remarkable about this boy, something that had saved him, and now intertwined their futures in ways Elias had not anticipated. With a deep breath and a determination that had been quietly building, Elias made a decision that would change Noah's life forever. "You've given me something no one else could, Noah," Elias said, his voice steady with purpose. "Your loyalty saved me, and I'll never forget it." "I want you to be part of my family, Noah," Elias said, his voice steady and full of conviction. "I'll take care of you, help you build a future, and more than that, I'll teach you everything I know so you can grow safely and have the opportunities you deserve." The firmness in Elias's words made Noah's eyes brighten with hope. Elias's will, recently updated to ensure Celeste could never claim his fortune, was revised once more. This time, it included a crucial addition. Noah would be named as the primary heir. Elias vowed to do everything in his power to prepare the boy to take over the empire he had spent his life building. The lawyer reviewed the new documents while Elias explained the details to Noah. "This means that one day, you'll be in charge of everything," Elias said. "But for that, we'll work together. You'll learn everything you need to become a wise and just leader." Noah listened intently, his emotions a mix of pride and disbelief. A boy who had grown up on the streets, without family or guidance, could hardly believe what he was hearing. He tried to hold back tears, but his eyes betrayed him. Elias, noticing the boy's overwhelmed expression, placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "You deserve this, Noah, and I'll be with you every step of the way so you'll never face the hardships you've endured again." At that moment, something profound was forged between them, a bond that transcended words. Noah silently promised himself to honor the trust and kindness Elias had shown him. He would become the man Elias believed he could be. From that day on, their relationship transformed. They worked together, not merely as mentor and apprentice, but as a family united by shared values and a vision for the future. The betrayal and intrigue of the past were left behind, replaced with the promise of a new beginning. For Noah, it was a rebirth. The street boy who had risked everything to save Elias's life was no longer an outsider, but an integral part of the family they were forming. For Elias, the experience had been equally transformative. The pain of recent months had reshaped his understanding of loyalty, trust, and the true meaning of relationships. The mansion adapted to Noah's presence, its once empty halls now filled with a new energy. Elias patiently guided Noah, gradually introducing him to the intricacies of the empire he had built. At first, Noah felt out of place, as if living a dream that might shatter at any moment. But Elias made it clear he belonged. "You're going to learn everything I know, kid," Elias would say. "I don't just want you to inherit what I built. I want you to understand it, to lead with intelligence and integrity." Each lesson became a stepping stone, bolstering Noah's confidence and developing his skills. Day by day, Elias taught him not only the practicalities of business, but also the values that sustained true leadership. Respect, responsibility, and honesty, Elias would explain. "These are what will set you apart. Carry these with you, and you'll make a difference." Noah absorbed every word, his admiration for Elias deepening into a heartfelt desire to prove himself worthy of this trust. For Elias, every moment spent with Noah was a revelation. Watching the boy grow and transform brought a renewed sense of joy and purpose to his life. He realized that his wealth and success meant little without leaving a legacy that truly mattered. "You're my family now, Noah," Elias said one evening as he watched the boy tackle a particularly challenging task. And family means support, trust, and always being there for each other. Those words resonated deeply with both of them, sealing their bond. For Elias, Noah represented a new reason to live. For Noah, Elias was the family he had never known, a guide, a mentor, and now a father figure. Together, they began building a future full of promise, their lives forever intertwined in a story of redemption, trust, and transformation. Elias never imagined he would find this sense of peace again, The moments he now shared with Noah transcended business. They were about life. Quiet dinners, heartfelt conversations, shared plans, and laughter once again filled the mansion, replacing the emptiness that had lingered for so long. For Noah, this was a rebirth. It was more than just a chance to grow. It was a chance to belong. Beside Elias, he found something he had never known before: a home. The mansion, once an unreachable fortress, became a place of warmth and possibility. Day by day, Noah grew stronger and more confident, discovering the potential Elias had seen in him all along. He learned to navigate challenges with intelligence and compassion, feeling more capable with each passing day. As time went on, the bond between Elias and Noah deepened. They became more than just mentor and apprentice. They were father and son in every way that mattered. Together, they formed a partnership built on mutual respect, trust, and unwavering loyalty. The mansion, once cold and distant, now pulsed with life. The silence that had once defined it was replaced with a warmth born of shared purpose and affection. Elias and Noah had created a space where trust flourished, where they could face any challenge together. It was the beginning of a new story, a story of resilience, friendship, and hope. United by the shadows of a painful past, Elias and Noah now walked boldly toward a brighter future, determined to build something meaningful together. This tale of Elias and Noah reminds us that loyalty and trust are the most valuable treasures of all. Betrayed by those he loved most, Elias found an unexpected ally in Noah, a street boy who risked everything to save him. Together, they show us that family is not defined by blood, but by the people who stand by us in our most challenging moments. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, like the video, and turn on notifications so you won't miss more inspiring content.